The power of the made-up mind. When we make our mind up to do something, what's the power? What's the result that comes from that, right? So there's three things. It's the power of the made-up mind. It's the power of our choices that we make. And ultimately, where do you stand now? Like, what's your time? What are you going to do right now with what we talk about tonight? It's your time. What do you decide to do? So the power of the made-up mind, right? How do you know you have a made-up mind? How do you know when you have a made-up mind? You know when you never give up. If you're doing something and you're failing and you give up, then you didn't have a made-up mind. You didn't, because you're struggling, and we struggle all the time. Whenever we make up our mind to do something, we're going to have issues, we're going to have challenges, we're going to struggle. It's when you give up, that means your mind wasn't made up in that moment. It wasn't made up, because if it's made up, you never give up. That's how you know. So one of the second things you know, you become resolute. It's almost the same thing. You have this resolve never to give up. And so there's a story of a guy, I met him and his son maybe 15, 20 years ago. I was at a real estate event. Anybody know the names Dick and Ricky Hoyt? Anybody know them? So Dick Hoyt, he was I think he was a Marine guy, he was a military guy, and his son was born a spastic quadriplegic. He was born that way. So I don't know, 15 years old or so, they got involved in a marathon. So so Dick Hoyt was pushing his son in a wheelchair, and he's just pushing him along, trotting along, and they were coming towards the end of the race, the end of the marathon, and all of a sudden they were like in last place, and the son was a spastic quadriplegic, right? And all of a sudden the father's like, we got to beat one guy. So towards the end of the race, he said, let's go. And he pushed it, he pushed it, and he passed one guy, and the son's hand went up. And so he had that technology that he could, I guess, blink or use his eye movement to talk into the computer to spit out whatever he wanted to say. And he went home that night and he said to his dad, he said, when we passed that guy, I didn't feel like I was handicapped anymore. Can you imagine that? So the dad had a made-up mind. So because of that, they got involved in regular marathons, in triathlons, and Ironmans. So if you know, they did, and to qualify for the Boston Marathon, you have to do it under 3 hours. And I don't know how many, he did like 20-some Boston marathons he did with his son. Crazy, right, in this situation. He did a few Ironmans. And you know what an Ironman is like. I know there's one person here who knows what an Ironman is like. So if you don't know Rob, he did an Ironman triathlon about 9 months ago almost now. We might talk a little bit about that. So he didn't know. I might put him on the spot tonight, but I might. So anyway, but you have to have this resolve. So he did all this. So what happens? I mean, think about it. He's doing an Ironman triathlon with his son, who's a quadriplegic. So what's he do? He puts him in a raft with a rope tied around it. He's got to swim 2.4 miles. Then he's got to get on a bike with him on I don't call it a basket, but a side bucket or whatever you want to call it, and he's got to pedal and bike for 112 miles. And oh, by the way, when he's done that, he's got to run 26.2 miles. So he's not doing it on his own. That's hard enough, as Robbie would attest to it, but he's doing it with somebody. That takes a lot of resolve. It takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of fortitude. But he had a made-up mind. So then the next piece of that is, when you have a made-up mind, your focus has got to be on the wins. It's got to be on all the wins, not on the losses, because you're going to struggle. You're going to have difficulties. You got to focus on all the wins, even the little wins. So if you're training for something like that, even the little wins that you have each and every day when you're training, when you celebrate those wins and you focus on those wins, that's going to give you the energy to keep moving forward with that made-up mind. And one of the other things that happens is when you get around these people, it becomes a community. And I'll keep pointing to Robbie, and I just did this dance thing a week and a half ago, which it was a whole new world for me. I did a charity dance for Alzheimer's, and like my wife and I went to a couple, I guess they call it showcases, rehearsals or whatnot, and we're like, there's a whole nother world out there that we didn't really know about or know existed. And you become part of these other communities, and what happens is you attract like-minded people. So when you're in a competition, whether it's a triathlon, a dance, or whatever the case may be, you attract those like-minded people. And that energy, it just builds and builds and builds, and it's going to help you, give you the momentum to have that made-up mind. So those are just some of the things you got to think about when you have the made up mind. So there's a story about a gunnery sergeant back in Vietnam. And he was all ready to retire. Packed his bags up, ready to go. But there was this general in Viet Cong that we needed to kill. And so this guy, he was a sniper. He could knock somebody out from 2,500 yards away. And they're like, we need to take this guy out. And here he's ready to pack his bags. So they asked this guy, we need you to do it. But here's the problem. This is pretty much a suicide mission. This is pretty much like you're not likely to come out alive. Because what they had to do, overnight they had to drop him in behind enemy lines in a field that was, I think it was, they said 2,500 yards long. And it's going to take 3 days to crawl through this field so he's not seen by the other snipers in the Viet Cong. And then he's got to get himself in a position where he's going to take out the general, because the general would come out every day and do his practices in front of wherever he was located. And then after that, he's supposed to come back the 2,500 yards, and then he's got this balloon thing. He pulls his pin up, shoots his balloon up, and he gets pulled up, and a plane's going to get him in midair to get him out of there. So this is likely not to be a success. So what they didn't tell him, they drop him behind enemy lines, and what he didn't know is this 2,500 yards that he's got to crawl was infested with red ants. So think of it. Anybody got bitten by a red ant before? Fire ants. It doesn't feel good. So he's crawling and crawling and crawling for 3 days, and he's getting welts. And think about it, all that time, probably going a little goofy up here. He got through, did his thing, took out the general, gets back, goes up in the air, gets snagged by the airplane, gets out of it. I asked him, how do you know, why did you succeed? Why do you think you succeeded? He said, because I made up my mind. I made up my mind I was going to fulfill this obligation. I made up my mind I wasn't going to die. I made up my mind. So when we make up my mind, the power behind that is, you got to think about it. You make up your mind, you're focused, and you just go. So, like I said, I just did this charity dance. This guy's not a dancer. I wasn't until about a week ago, maybe, right? My wife will tell you, I'm not a dancer. But about 2 years ago, I put my book out. I published the book, and I said the first year of half of all the proceeds for the first year we're going to go to Alzheimer's, because my mom's got dementia. So this girl calls me up. She said, "This is so great. You're doing this. You're giving money to Alzheimer's. You're helping out." She goes, "I'm part of the Alzheimer's board, the committee. I would love for you to help us out." And I'm like, "Sure, I'll help out. What do you need me to do?" She goes, "We need you to dance." And I'm like, "Dance? I'm not dancing." And she goes, "No, Rob, you can do this. You can do this." So I sat there and I said, "There's no way I'm doing this." And I got off the phone and I said, "Deb, what do you think?" It's like, "It's for your mom. My mom's got dementia." I'm like, "All right, this isn't about me. It's something I've never done before. Let's go. Let's go do it." So I committed to it about two and a half years ago. Well, we did about 5-10 practices, and then the COVID hit, and it got canceled for 2 years straight. And so back in September, they're like, "We're putting it on. April 30th is the night. And it's time to go." My dancing partner calls me up. She goes, "You ready to start practicing?" So for 7 months, we're practicing. For the last 4 months, maybe twice a week. And they're like, an hour and a half long each time, and you're sweating. It's like pure cardio. But I made up my mind at that point to do this. Was I scared shitless? Yeah. Was I nervous the night of the event? Yeah. But with the practice and the practice and the practice and the fact that it's like there's no turning back. I made that commitment. And Ellen was there. You were there. Yeah. And you make up your mind, and like, we're going. So, I mean, we'd be at practice, and she's telling me to do this move and that move, and I'm looking at her, I'm like, I can't do that. And she goes, "You just keep pushing, just keep pushing, keep pushing." And we practice and we practice and we practice over and over again, and you get the moves down. And she would tweak it almost every practice or session or lesson, and I'm like, "When are you going to stop?" Just as soon as I get this down, you're tweaking it again. So then the next thing that happens, like, okay, we're supposed to raise money. So my goal was $25,000. We ended up raising $66,000. And thank you, some of you here tonight contributed to that. And it became a game. But I made up my mind. I started hitting the phones. I started hitting the phones for $50, $20, $100. I called Scott Mattingly 7 times. And here's the, so if somebody told me they were thinking about it or they would consider it, they were done. Because they opened that door, I was walking in, right? So Scott said, "So Scott, when you donate it, Scott, when you donate it, Scott, when you donate, show me some love, right?" That was some of the text, right? It's okay. So just sidetrack real quick, just a quick sidetrack. I'm hounding, we're all business people here. We're all salespeople to some degree, right? So I'm sitting there hitting the phones for $50, $20, $100, right? So in the real estate business, maybe we make $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 on a sale. And people struggle to make calls for their own business. Meanwhile, I'm making calls for a cause. So when we struggle, a lot of us have call reluctance. I know we do. I know it's the real deal. We get fearful in calling people because we're afraid of rejection. But if I'm calling for a cause, there's no fear. You say no, that's guilt on you, not me. I'm going to throw the Catholic guilt right at you. It's coming. So, but again, there was a made-up mind that I'm going to do this. And yes, so we practiced, we worked hard, we raised all the money, we get to the dance, and I'm nervous as all hell, and yes, we did it. Dance 2 minutes, done, gone, right? And it was just an amazing experience. So if that made, but here's the thing, who does that affect? Again, I said it's bigger than me, it's bigger than all the fundraising, it's about the people that are going to be helped by the fundraising. I mean, there were 700 people at this event, people giving money, people, there's all kind of different dances and whatnot. More than I got affected, more than my mom got affected. The future of this disease, hopefully, it gets eradicated at some point. So there could be millions and millions of people to get affected by people that made up their mind to do this event. Because this is the Baltimore Memory Ball. I got to believe they're all over the country. Think about the magnitude of that. So the power of a made-up mind can lead to something like that. So it's about the decision, making that decision, that commitment. So saying that, like I mentioned earlier, like Robbie right here, I'm going to point out two things with him. He did a triathlon, Ironman triathlon, 10 months ago, 9 months ago, in September of 21. He made a commitment, he made a decision to say, I'm going to do this. And Rob, you say yourself, was it easy training? No. Were there times you wanted to quit? Many. When you were in the race, was there a time you thought you were going to quit? More than many. Were there dark moments in that run? So 14 hours of a race, but he made a commitment to himself and he made up his mind that he was going to finish. And then what comes from that, there's a peace that comes from it, that you make up your mind to do something. There's a confidence that comes from that, right? You're like, man, I can do this. What else can I do? What's next? What else that I haven't done that I could do? What else am I not committing to that if I made up my mind to commit to, some things could happen? Right? So the other thing, I got to share this, I know I'm talking him up, but guy just graduated from Millersville University on Saturday. So give him a hand there. He graduates with a meteorology degree. Okay, so meet your newest meteorologist, Rob Commodari. And the point I want to make, when he was 5 years old, he was out on the deck doing weather things. So from the time he was 5, he knew he wanted to be a weather person, weatherman, meteorologist, whatever it was at that time. He knew he wanted to be involved in the weather at 5 years old. You know, I don't know a lot of people that are like that. There are some out there, but 5 years old. So he had his mind made up at 5 that I'm going to be, whether it's a meteorologist or involved in weather to some degree, he had his mind made up. Now, were there times you thought about walking away from it? Were there times just as recent as 3 years ago you thought, well, walking away from it? Because I'm sure the classes are hard, they're challenging, but he had a made up mind. And now he's a meteorologist, and he's going to go to Texas Tech in the fall. I'm trying not to cry. Texas Tech, he's going to Texas Tech University for his graduate degree, and he's telling us he wants to be a professor, so he could be Dr. Rob in about 5, 6 years, you know, 6 more years of schooling. So, but it's the power of the made up mind, and he wants to study severe weather. So if taking that route, how many people could he help, you know, maybe whatever studies he takes on, saving in severe weather? So it's a trickle-down effect. So it's about the decisions we make. We make decisions to make up our mind to do something. It's not going to affect only you, it's going to affect those people closest to you, and there's going to be a ripple effect of people you don't even know. So I'll tell you one more story. You guys know, you may know this story. Who knows the book Man's Search for Meaning? Anybody know it? Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl. Okay, you familiar with it, Pat? So he was a psychologist. He was Jewish. In the concentration camps back then, he was a prisoner. And he would notice this pattern. He would see the train cars come, and some of the prisoners get off the train cars who've been there 3, 4, 5 years, coming off the train, emaciated, or emaciated, whatever the word is, emaciated. And he would see people that were just picked up 30, 69 days earlier who looked healthy, who looked very healthy. And what the pattern was, the people that were more emaciated than the ones that were healthy looking, they lasted longer. They survived. Some of them survived. Why? Because they had a made-up mind that they were going to live. And that's what he discovered in his psychology in the prison camps. You've got to have a made-up mind. So when you don't have a made-up mind, you're going to struggle even more. You got to commit to something. So it's the decision, and that decision is yours. The choices are yours to make. So the last 2 questions I'll ask you is to think about. Think about this. You don't have to give me answers right now. Where in your life have you made up your mind, and who and what benefited from that? Think about that. Where in your life or when in your life have you made up your mind and something's come of it, and when haven't you made up mind when you should have? Okay? That's 2 parts of the first question. The second question I'm going to ask you is, walking out of this room tonight, after hearing this, thinking about it, where in your life now do you need to make up your mind? What decision do you have to make right now that's about having a made-up mind and moving forward with what you need to do? Whether it's a career decision, a family decision, an education decision, where do you need to make up your mind? And think about not just the short term, not just you, who else is it going to impact? Who's going to thrive from it? Who's going to benefit from it? Again, not just others, but yourself. Everybody, it's a ripple, it's a trickle-down effect, it's a ripple effect. Making up our mind to do whatever we decide to do. So you got to ask yourself, where have I made up my mind, and what happened, and where do I intend to, what decisions I intend to make right now that's going to impact people in my life and everywhere else. So I think that's all I got. Any questions on this? I mean, it can be deep stuff. We make up our minds, we're going places. We don't, we're going to get stuck on a treadmill just going over and over, hamster wheel, over and over.
So you said there were times when you wanted to give up. What was it that you told yourself that kept you from giving up?
So real quick, I don't know if everybody heard her. So she asked, Robbie said there was times when he wanted to give up, and she asked, what told you to keep going, right? Is that what you said?
Well, how were you able to keep going?
How was he able to keep going?
Wanted to give up. I mean, usually when people want to give up, they do. So how were you able to keep going? What was it that you told yourself that kept you going?
So I guess to keep it short here. I don't know what
Short, yeah.
my main reason for doing that was like that was talking to impact others, and like that's.
Hey Rob, can you stand up so everybody can hear you?
Yeah.
Stand up next to your dad.
There you go.
So we get good audio too.
There you go. Come on.
Repeat the question.
So there was times when he was thinking about giving up, and how did he know not to give up, or what made him keep going?
Yeah, what were you telling yourself?
So talking to the mic now.
Oh, you got, okay. So yeah, basically with that, what Dad was saying is about having that made up mind. For me, I wasn't thinking about that, of course, when I was running along there during the final 6 miles of the marathon, right? But my purpose of doing this was just to find a way to impact others, to inspire someone else, maybe to get into the pool for the first time and swim a lap, maybe to go out and start a business. It didn't have to relate to sports in any way, but whatever it was, somewhere down the line in their life, inspire them to do something new, right? And for me, that's my core belief, my core value, that's my moral. That's what I want to do with my life. That's why I want to be a professor later on, impact more young children, like not children, but individuals like where I am right now. And in that moment, that's what I wanted to do, and that's where my heart is. So Mom told me the other day, go with your heart, with whatever it is. That's what I did.
So you were inspired to actually get to your goal, and that's what.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Rob. So I think one of the key points he said, what's in his heart. So what are the desires of your heart? And this wasn't planned, by the way. Thank you for giving me my last final closing piece. What are the desires of your heart? And if you sit there and take the time and think through it, what are my desires? That will help you make that commitment and make up your mind. So look into your heart, reflect, meditate, journal, think about it. What are the true desires of your heart? Who do you want to impact? Who do you want to do it for? And I'll finish with this. Who's familiar with P90X? Anybody ever hear? You know what the mantra is? Decide, commit, succeed. Make the decision to have a made-up mind, commit to it, and there's no stopping you.